Morning, everybody. Coffee kicked in yet? As you can tell, I'm super formal, and I wore my good sneakers. So yeah, why did they bring me here? I'm an ethical hacker and cybersecurity expert. I did something really stupid a couple of years ago, which took me from being a solutions engineer to being one of the more, I guess, famous hackers on the planet. I don't really like to kind of refer to it as sort of famous. I'm not Michael Jordan, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. So, from my perspective as a hacker, I guess it started when I was a kid. I used to like to break things, which doesn't go over real well when you're a kid. Now, as an adult, I have a reverence for the rules, which naturally meant I joined the Marine Corps. They don't like independent thought so much, personality or your own opinions, so I stayed in for 4 years and decided to move on to bigger and better things. I was a linguist. I was in Iraq for 2 years. That was enough, playing in the sand. Sand does not go well with computer equipment. I ended up writing a book. I'm now on John McAfee's board to answer some questions. Usually my keynotes generate a lot of questions. Number one, I don't know if he murdered that guy. I really don't. If I did, do I think telling it to a bunch of people at every conference is a good idea? No, I don't think so either. We don't want to make the murder score go up to 2. I gave a TED talk called Wiretapping the Secret Service Can Be Easy and Fun, which is kind of the subject of the book that I wrote, which is holding up coffee tables everywhere. The idea was that Google Maps and Bing Maps and all of these directories had flaws based all in social engineering. So what you see, if you're looking for, let's say, a carpet cleaner, you're looking for a landscaper's office, you never would actually go to their office. So people found ways of manipulating the data to where even today on Bing Maps, there are more locksmiths in Redmond, Washington, than there are actual registered locksmiths in the state of Washington. Because the money and the lead generation is so big, people found ways to manipulate it. I know because I worked for a guy who made 3,000 different auto glass places across the country that don't really exist, making 10 or 20 million a year. Huge money, but you have to compromise your ethics and soul, so I wouldn't advise doing it. That's what led me to figuring out that I don't know how to put this to make me not look like an idiot, but I created a Secret Service location that looked exactly like the real Secret Service location here in DC, which makes me nervous because there's Secret Service cars everywhere. And I was walking to go get Indian food, and there's like 2 of them, and I'm like, I'm not gonna take the risk, and I'm gonna go get some Chipotle. So, Secret Service in DC, FBI in San Francisco used a regular marketing phone number. Using their spam algorithm, if you flag a location as spam 5, 6, 7, 8 times, they think that a whole bunch of people are complaining, this is a duplicate listing, and we're gonna go ahead and just automatically remove it without a human interaction. So now my listing with my phone number is the only thing for the Secret Service on Google Maps. Some of you are getting ahead of me. You can see where this is going, and that's where it goes. So immediately after that, phone calls started coming in. And I listened to 1 or 2 of them before I realized I didn't want to listen to the one phone call you can't unhear. Like, Dick Cheney's really an alien, and they're going to come for me. The next morning, I walked into the Secret Service office, told them I was successful with recording 40 calls to them. After about 15 minutes of explaining, they asked me to leave, and they'd get a hold of me again. And I could tell they were brushing me off because I sounded like a crazy person. They're not wrong, but I was telling the truth. I asked the Secret Service agent, who's physically in the room with me. There's 3 of them in suits, and there's me and whatever t-shirt and jeans I was wearing. And the guy said, okay, we'll get a hold of you. And I said, just call the Secret Service in DC. And this is in Seattle. He picks up his phone, he does his thing. And this is where that David Blaine sort of magic moment kind of happens, where you're expecting someone to do something that you have no way of predicting. And I'm hoping he's got an Android phone. And I'm hoping that he's using Google as the default mechanism. Because if he used Bing, Number one, I would have made fun of him. Number two, who uses Bing as their default search unless it's like bundled with your browser? I know what I use for. It's for downloading Chrome. So he uses his Android phone, and he taps on it. Yep, this is Bryan from Seattle. His name is also Bryan for added confusion. And he's talking to the guy in DC. He knows the guy personally, hangs up the phone. So me and the two other agents didn't hear the conversation from the other guy. I got a text message on my phone saying, "You've had a new inbound marketing call. Would you like to play that call?" Reluctantly, I pushed play to the notification and said, "Okay," and I pushed the speakerphone, and it played back his conversation that he just had. And now we could hear both sides of the conversation. And kudos to Secret Service agents. They're all like ex-military, they're all ex-cops, so they've got really good bearing, and nothing really rattles him. So the first words out of his mouth were, "Oh shit." And that's when they got to their most hospitable sort of point in the day where they took all my stuff. I had to like high-five the wall with both hands. They searched me, they read me my rights, and they put me in the guest suite for 4.5 hours. And I had to repeat this entire explanation about 100 different times. The thing that saved my butt that people didn't really wrap their heads around, and the thing that was overlooked was there was no criminal intent. I wouldn't have gone to the Secret Service immediately after doing this, and I had actually called 3 or 4 local police officers I'd worked with and some other friends of people I was in the Marines with, thank goodness. And they all vouched and said, "This guy isn't all bad, he's totally an idiot, we get that, but he doesn't have any malicious intent." So they let me go, which resulted in a Gawker story, Gizmodo, and Gadget, and you can imagine. Someone included my LinkedIn profile link, and just to give you an idea of scale, I had like 1 or 2 profile views on LinkedIn every week up until that week, and then I had 500 invites in one day and 10,000 views in like a 24-hour period. And now I think I had just hit 14,000 LinkedIn connections, which is completely unmanageable. There's no way I can find or get anything done on that platform anymore, because it's 10 or 20 invites a day, and everyone's like, "Hey, do you know John? We'd like to pitch you a product." I'm like, I'm gonna like charge a fee anytime anyone wants me to like pitch something to him or Mark Cuban or whatever, because I got to work with him for some reason. So what I do now, oh yeah, references, I forgot about this slide. I was appointed to John's board last year. Got to go work with MGT. They've got some cool products coming out, and nothing makes me happier than being able to like come to a corporate event and a conference of companies that make outstanding products and then say security is not a product. It is and it isn't. It's a whole posture. Everyone knows that this product and Thycotic, I'm actually kind of impressed. And also, could you not name it Secret Server, because it's too close to Secret Service, and every time you say it, it's just like, ugh, like I'm getting little mini strokes. So the meat and potatoes, the top attack vectors that we see, web application attacks, application-specific, some of the ones that actually got me even more famous than more recognition that got me on CNN. There was 22 million socials we discovered and found bank accounts with like $30 billion just sitting with the back door open because of an Oracle vulnerability that was unpatched for 2 years. That was like a severity level 10. Everyone knows about it, except all the people who bought the actual server. None of them actually patched it. This included 500 different universities. This included the Port Authority of Maryland, specifically Baltimore, which had all the log files for everyone who visited the Port Authority, including 30 people from the Defense Intelligence Agency. The first 3 names on the list were John Smith, and John Doe. But then it had all their social security numbers, or it had their driver's license numbers. And these are clandestine people all visiting the Port Authority for some, I don't even want to imagine what reason, because the second I start thinking, bad stuff starts to happen. that 20, 30 million, and this wasn't even my job. I was bored. It was like a Friday night, and I was, digging into just different search engines, and then all of a sudden you're on CNN. Malware and ransomware is kind of a different thing, and so is DDoS. The biggest DDoS in history happened recently. I was the very first person to actually see the logs. Bryan, if you guys, show of hands, know who the guy is? He's a friend of mine now because I don't have many other friends who are normal. They're normal, quote unquote. How many people here are support engineers? Right, engineers in some fashion. Yeah, I'm more comfortable with you guys than the salespeople and the fancy dress. Like, I'm not a sales guy. I'm a tier 4, Skype for Business, Link, 7 MCSEs or above in that specific product line. So it was very siloed, very much basement, Hot Pocket, Mountain Dew. Didn't shave for weeks on end, couldn't get a girlfriend. I started off at like 3 years old, figuring out computers were easier than girls, and now I'm 35. Ransomware has gotten weird. I actually found, everyone knows what ransomware is, kind of. People come in, encrypt all your stuff, demand Bitcoin. They found a way to convert an attack vector into the actual end game. It used to be just steal identity, open up banking, checking accounts, whatever they can possibly do to steal. And the process is 6-8 weeks. It takes forever, but eventually the hard work pays off. Ransomware is much, much faster. It's much more convenient. And if you're actually doing what you're supposed to, it wouldn't matter. Because we all know, like, if you actually have offsite backups and they're done properly, and you have the incrementals and the dailies and the fulls and all that, and like if everything's done and all the fundamentals are great, ransomware really is just an inconvenience. But it still works for a lot of people because people are forgetting the fundamentals. I found a case where a cop friend of mine from the Marine Corps called me last week from Louisiana, a CPA firm, had all of their files taken from their servers and uploaded to an Amazon S3, and then uploaded to another server, and then encrypted. And then the hard drives over the weekend were all triple wiped, except for the operating system base. So they open it up, and all they see when they log in is a notepad. I mean, have some class. Like, at least use Paint or something, or a Photoshop, something. But they had notepad said, all your files belong to us. And in true, like, I was just like, nice. Like, that's classy. Like, that's a good reference. In Notepad saying, if you want your files back, email this, email here. We'll send you instructions for how to get your stuff. So they took everything and offloaded it. I've never seen anyone go through that much trouble. But ransomware is evolving, everything's evolving, because we keep figuring out ways to plug the leaks, and they keep coming up with new ways to screw this. So what do they want? Private data, credit cards, social security numbers, those are always valuable. They sell on the dark web for a few dollars. They sell, depending on what they're called, fulls. You can get credit cards with the 3-digit CVV code. You can get the billing address, the social security number, the mother's maiden name. The more data you possibly have, the less research they have to do. They can go and find your mother's maiden name, and if you can actually go on the dark web, pay $1 to get access to LexisNexis's private system, because yes, they've got a backdoor, and they turned it into a web page, and they turned it into a service on the dark web. It's hilarious. You can actually go and see the backdoor in operation and just pay a little bit of money, and you can get someone's social security number. Every single person here, unless you don't have one. Access to private resources, like we said, it turns into just getting access to your network. It goes back to the compartmentalization thing. That's another thing people don't realize. Employees can become disgruntled very quickly. Like, all it takes is, I support Trump, or I support so-and-so, and you get a divide that's created, and all of a sudden one person becomes disgruntled, or they know they're going to get fired. What can I steal? People don't always react predictably. And at that point, how much access did you give them? And that's usually the last thing on people's lists. And back to revenge and sabotage. Denial of service isn't as common. Most people won't have to deal with it unless you're like a Bryan type guy who's actively going and shaming publicly and tracking people down. And I love that guy. And he just won like a presidential award and got to speak at the White House. And he gets free heroin in the mail. Someone literally sent him heroin and then called the cops and reported him. And that guy actually just got sentenced to like 3 to 5 years in jail for that charge and a bunch of other stuff. But I'm like, dude, free heroin. Like, I don't care who you are. Drugs are expensive. So thank you. And that color didn't render properly. They're both supposed to be blue. Unless you're colorblind, and then everything's fine. And the solutions are boring. Dude, you get a keynote speaker. I don't have magic. I'm not Harry Potter. It's hire an expert, train your people. Security posture is important. It's not something you can ignore anymore. It's not everything's changing. Passwords change. You can't write stuff down on stickies. How many people have gone into an environment in professional services or otherwise, or started a new job and been like, all right, so can I get an overlay of our network? And not found a really good Visio, or not found a really good topology, or an updated Excel sheet with the MAC addresses, and be like, what's the MAC address of this? Oh, no one knows. How many servers do we have? 15-ish. Ish is not a number. No one has a really good inventory, and that's always a problem, because people are lazy. I'm lazy. It happens like every day. My girlfriend constantly complains about it. Updates, patching, the SEC, Equifax. I mean, the Equifax had 150 million things leaked because they didn't patch something. And they were told. It was like, this is the worst day of your life if you don't patch this. Got it. Want to go to lunch? And then they did that every day until they got breached. Because the hackers are waiting for this stuff. It's not like Apache gets notified of the vulnerability, and then the patch gets created, and it goes worldwide, and then the hackers start going and looking for stuff. They've already inventoried and surveyed every possible web server that's out there using these types of software, and they're only waiting for the vulnerabilities, or they're developing the vulnerabilities themselves. The NSA got hit with, or the CIA and the NSA, every time a breach happens with them, we find out that they know about vulnerabilities in manufacturers for years and don't tell us, which compromises millions of people. The hackers are doing the same thing, and they're treating this like a job. Organized crime now has hundreds of developers building ransomware in rooms like this and having secret conferences in volcanoes somewhere, in the evil villains and so on. And it's boring. And they're treating it like a job. They're doing this 8, 10, 12 hours a day, eating whatever the Russian equivalent of Hot Pockets are. And back to backups. Like, really, do I have to talk about it? Because I'll kill myself. And then people are like, well, what's the expert going to tell you? Disaster recovery plan. Do you have one? If you don't, then we really need that expert. Event and log management, updates, patching, sticky notes. Don't write down your passwords. And now that's even so antiquated. Network segmentation, super sexy, really boring stuff that's really hard to get passionate about unless you've seen it over and over and over again. If there's a really cool product I got to use that it was like an overlay network that you can easily drag and drop things into network segments, and it encrypts everything between endpoints. Really, really hard to use and really hard to implement. Super cool stuff designed for the military, for drone communication over like a WAN. But people are going to get there. Security stuff's going to work better as we move on. Pen testing, mobile device policy, all of this stuff is what an expert like me will tell you when you hire me to come and talk or actually consult at your company. But yeah, there's no magic here. It's the fundamentals, it's the basics, and the hackers are winning currently, as far as I'm concerned. The coolest thing in the world was the SEC getting hacked for me recently, was that the guy, I was on CNBC with this guy, and he was like, well, they did the equivalent of breaking into Fort Knox, and they stole gold bars, because what happened at the SEC was the hackers got access to market data and all the disclosure reports for companies that had not been released yet, which would affect stock price. That's not stealing gold bars. That's stealing the ability to print money. These guys now know how to bet on the market, and you won't be able to catch them. I mean, even with cryptocurrency, you can actually track the destinations of things. So the hackers are getting creative. They're disgruntled. They're smarter than me by a long shot, and I'm the one standing up here. These guys have all the time in the world. They've got money. They're driving Lambos in Eastern Bloc Europe with no regulation and no one telling them that they can't. We have to get better, and we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can, all this stuff. And if you're not capable of it, I am available. Well, not all the time. Like I said, I was lazy. So, if you have any questions after, I'm going to be around. We already answered the whole John McAfee murder situation. But yeah, if there's anything else you guys want to talk about, I'll be around and probably having some cranberry juice somewhere.